zvaničnu potvrdu 30. novembra u ovom terminu za čas. To je ponedeljak, znači isto ovako svi zajedno cela godina, onako kako u učionicama 107-108, onako kako sedite podeljeni na grupe, znači 30. ali dobit ćete još potvrdu na Google Classroom kao zvaničnu informaciju. Zanima vas verovatno i dokle je prva polovina gradiva. Danas ćemo stići do toga, do naslova grammatical categories. Ja ću vam to tačno reći. Znači, ja ću vam tačno reći kad budemo danas stigli do tog naslova da je to polovina gradiva. Tako. Pa ja predlažem da ja sad ovako, prvo da vas pitam da li imate neko pitanje pre nego što nastavimo. Dobro, ako ne, znači vidjet ćete, ako budem previše brzo pričao, vi mi jednostavno to kažite. Drugo, ostavit ću na nekim mestima vremena da se vi javite da odgovorite na neka pitanja, pa ako mislite da znate odgovor, javite se. Znači, to je isto tako zgodno da ne bude samo moja priča, nego ćete možda i vi imati neku ideju za odgovor. Ja ću sad ubaciti slajd koji treba da se vidi. Evo ovako. Sad je, pretpostavljam, sve u redu. Dobro, sad pretpostavljam da svi vidimo ovaj slajd, jel tako? Znači, grammar continued, to je ono što ćete dobiti na svoje mail adrese, na Google Classroom u stvari. I ako svi vidimo ovo, ja bih onda krenuo, možda samo da potvrdi neko od vas da li vidite ovaj fajl, trebalo bi da se ovo sad vidi.
Sve se vidi.
Da, vidimo.
U redu, onda krećem. Okay? The fourth lecture, grammar continued. You remember that we did about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, we started grammar. We gave the basic definition, and we stopped at 2 basic types of relations, syntagmatic and paradigmatic. This is where we can start now. Okay? So simply, syntagmatic relations, just let me check this. Somebody else wants to come here. Yes, okay. Okay, all right. Syntagmatic relations, they are simply combination of elements as you can read it in a concrete linguistic string, which means this is a horizontal axis of combination. If you think about it, these are concrete words which you use in a sentence. Horizontally. We'll have an example in a minute. Okay, so syntagmatic comes from syntagm. G is actually not pronounced. Let me just check the yes, somebody else. Okay. So G is not pronounced, but syntagm means phrase. So syntagmatic relations are relations between words and phrases in a horizontal axis. Paradigmatic relations between units present, but those which are not present but possible. This is a vertical axis of selection. If you think about it, horizontal and vertical, we'll have an example right now. So paradigm actually means a set of related forms or items. So what is, for example, an adjectival paradigm in English? Okay, let me just check if somebody else wants to be admitted. Yes, okay. So, adjectival paradigm in English is nice, nicer, nicest, which means positive, comparative, superlative degree. Let me just check this again, okay? Yes. Okay, so adjectival paradigm, nice, nicer, nicest. This is what I mean by set of related forms. Okay, now we have an example. His friend bought a new computer. Okay, again, let me admit somebody. Okay, yes. Okay, so his friend bought a new computer. This is a syntagmatic horizontal line. These are the words which are present and which are concretely present here. Yes, okay. So his friend bought a new computer. These words and phrases represent syntagmatic relations, horizontal. However, if you check the second and the third line, her, instead of her, you can use his. or a there. Instead of friend, you can use uncle or teacher. Instead of boat, you can use sold or found, and so on. Instead of computer, you can use book or apartment. So this vertical axis is an axis of, as you remember, axis of selection. Okay. Okay, again. Okay, axis of selection, which means you can choose his, her, there. Horizontally, it's syntagmatic. It's present. It's a units present in a sentence. I believe it is clear. If it is not, you can ask a question and stop. I mean, you can ask a question now or later, whenever you want. Okay. So these are syntagmatic and paradigmatic relations, horizontally or vertically. So grammar has rules. Rules can be prescriptive and descriptive. We already mentioned, you remember, prescriptive, descriptive grammar when we discussed history of English. So traditional pedagogical grammar is, you probably remember, recommendation how people should talk, what is acceptable, what is not. Descriptive rules, how people actually talk, all possible relations, not just recommended. Let's see these examples. Abacus, abaci, abacuses. Okay, abacus is a Latin word, but it is used in English meaning a very simple device for calculation. Nešto kao računaljka. Okay. Okay, let me admit somebody. Okay. So abacus, it's a Latin word with a Latin ending, and prescriptive grammar would say you would have to use Latin plural, which is abaci. Descriptive grammar would say yes, you can use Latin plural, but also English plural, abacuses. So both are acceptable. Prescriptive would say, okay, only abaci are acceptable because it's a word from Latin. Or the second example, it is I, it is me. Prescriptives would say it is I is grammatical because this is a position for a nominative case. But you can also, descriptive would say, you can also say me, not only nominative, but accusative case of the pronoun. I think we already explained descriptive, prescriptive grammar. This is just a couple of more examples. However, descriptive grammar describes all possible relations, but it does not mean that all combinations are grammatical, are possible. So that's why we have stylistics or sociolinguistics, which means, for example, in sociolinguistics, you say that something belongs to standard language, which means this is fully grammatical acceptable, and something belongs to dialect or perhaps colloquial speech, spoken communication, not really to literal language, not really to standard language. So sociolinguistics would say this is standard, this is not. So let's see these examples from Serbian. Grammatical u vezi s tim, with s, okay? But you hear quite often, you must have heard it quite often, u vezi toga, which is actually not really in standard language. That's why I have here an asterisk. But people still say it, even though it does not belong to standard language. But u vezi sa to is completely unacceptable because the case is wrong with to, okay? And this is completely unacceptable. So to conclude, descriptive grammar would say, yes, people also say u vezi toga, but this is not standard language. So it does not mean that all combinations are possible in descriptive grammar. Okay? Now, if you do not have any questions about this, we can go to the parts of speech and grammatical categories. Okay? So grammar studies parts of speech and grammatical categories. And this is what we are going to do briefly. This is probably the easy part. I believe you already know this, so we're going quickly through this, I believe, okay? So parts of speech, what is the Serbian word for this? It simply means vrste reči, okay? Parts of speech, vrste reči. This is what we do in traditional grammar. They are based on Latin. So we classify words into parts of speech on the basis of their meaning and form. So meaning and form are criteria, okay? Perhaps you can tell me what are the Serbian verbs for inflected and not inflected words. How would you translate? Možete reći kako? Inflected are which words in Serbian? Or let me give you the term. Inflected would be promenljive. Okay, not inflected would be nepromenljive reči, parts of speech. Okay, so which parts of speech are not inflected in a language, in English, for example, or in Serbian? For example, prepositions, like for, of, above, they are not inflected. Okay, inflected like nouns for cases, verbs for tenses, and so on. Okay, you can also have open and closed classes of words. Open classes, I'm sure you already know it, so I'm going to just explain it quickly. Open classes where you can add new words like nouns and verbs, you can adjectives, you can always create new nouns and verbs and adjectives. Closed classes, we do not create new words. For example, we do not create new pronouns, new prepositions, and so on. So open and closed classes. And these are the parts of speech we have in traditional grammar like nouns, pronouns, adjectives, numbers, and so on, ending by articles. So we are going to say very briefly something about each of these. You already know that, very simply, nouns denote names of persons, animals, things, ideas. But I would like to ask you, we have different types of nouns. We have personal nouns, common nouns, collective nouns, mass nouns, abstract nouns. What is the Serbian term for common nouns? Perhaps you know. What is the Serbian word for common nouns?
Zajedničke.
Zajedničke. Maybe you know what is the Serbian word for mass nouns. Mass nouns. Yes, sorry, you can repeat it, please.
Zbirne.
Zbirne bi bili ovi više kao kolektiv, okay? Mass nouns
Gradivne.
Exactly, gradivne imenice, yes. Mass nouns like, like water or milk and so on, which denote actually different kinds of material and so on. Okay, gradivne imenice, yes. Collective nouns are zbirne imenice. Abstract nouns, I think it's clear. Okay, so pronouns refer to persons or things, you know that. They can replace nouns. They can stand in front of nouns. So we have personal, interrogative, relative, possessive, demonstrative pronouns. Let's just say something about these demonstrative. Which demonstrative pronouns in English do you know, perhaps? You can give me an example. Demonstrative pronoun.
This, that.
Yes, exactly. This, that. I just wanted to add, how do you call these demonstrative pronouns in grammar, in modern grammar? They're actually called determiners, okay? Like this, that, those, and so on, okay? Just bear in mind that demonstrative pronouns in modern grammar, they're called determiners, okay? Adjectives, they denote characteristics of nouns. You already know that. They can stand in front of a noun, and then they have attributive function. I think we use the same term attribute in Serbian. But they can also be part of a predicate. In that case, they have predicative function. So in the example, the book is interesting. The predicate is interesting. Interesting is an adjective part of a predicate. This is a predicative function. I think it's quite clear. Okay, numbers. They, as you know, they denote amount of something or order of something, so they can be divided into cardinal and ordinal. Okay, ordinal redni broj. Ovo su, mi ih zovemo osnovni. Okay, verbs. Verbs denote an activity or a state. They function as the predicate. We have dynamic and stative verbs. So dynamic verbs denote activities, like running or swimming or painting. Stative verbs denote mental states, emotions, for example, like love, hate. Then, for example, think, or even verbs like resemble and own. Okay. Regular, irregular verbs. Regular, if they have regular simple past and past participle, like work, worked. Irregular, if they have irregular forms, like think, thought, and so on. They can be transitive, intransitive. I think it's clear. They can be reflexive if they're followed by a reflexive pronoun. They can be lexical and auxiliary. Now, lexical and auxiliary. What do you think? How would you explain what is the basic difference or differences between lexical and auxiliary verbs in English?
Auxiliary verbs do not have meaning of their own.
Yes, exactly. This is what I had in mind. Auxiliary verbs, they do not have a grammatical meaning. They have a grammatical function. Lexical verbs have the meaning of their own. You know, like if you say run or swim, it means a specific activity. But auxiliaries like be, have, and do, they do not have, they have a grammatical function for what? For making progressive or continuous tenses, for making passive, do to ask questions, and so on. Yes, so the meaning is different. Okay, then adverbs. Adverbs modify the predicate. They modify adjectives and other adverbs. So if they modify other adverbs, they're called intensifiers, like very quickly. Very is also an adverb, intensifier modifying the adverb quickly. I'm sure you can provide an example when they modify the predicate. If you run quickly, this would be an example to somebody ran quickly. This is an example of an adverb modifying the predicate. Okay. Prepositions, they stand in front of nouns, indicating spatial, temporal relations, direction, possession, and so on. You know, prepositions like of, for, to, and so on. Conjunctions linking words, phrases, and clauses like and, or, but, and others. Exclamations, they indicate emotions and attitudes. I'm sure you can provide an example of an exclamation in English. You have, I think we can hear a lot of these in different TV shows and other sources, okay? Particles, they have a grammatical function in Serbian like ne, li for questions, da, li, si, okay? In English, no. What is the Serbian word for particle? We also use the term particula, or yes, you can say, we use. So we can use the term particula, but what is the other term? Rečca, mislim da je to neko rekao, nisam sasvim siguran. Rečca ili particula, yes, okay, all right. And finally, articles in some languages, yes, in English, yes, but not in Serbian, okay. It said it's articles in English in front of a noun. So in some languages, like in Macedonian, after the noun. Usually they're not inflected. Usually articles have only one form, but in some languages you may get different forms of an article, okay? But we are not interested in that now, okay? Now, these are the parts of speech. However, what is the situation in English like? You know that in English we do not have specific suffixes for nouns, for verbs, and so on. So that's there, we may get overlappings. So for example, the word walk, without a sentence, you don't know if it is what, if it is a noun or a verb. You can have a walk, which is a noun, or you can walk somewhere, which is a verb. This overlapping with round is even more interesting. Perhaps you can tell me to which part of speech round can belong. We have several options. Perhaps you can tell me which parts of speech for round. Okay, let me add it. So round could be a noun.
Maybe adjective and noun.
Adjective and noun, exactly. Noun like in the fifth round, the first round, yes, in boxing. Or adjective, you know, the round table. Adjective, round table. But it can also be a verb. You remember our phonetics. You have to round your lips. You probably remember. So to round means it's a verb. And it can even be a preposition, round the corner. In that case, it's a preposition. So it has 4 or 5 options without a sentence. It can belong to more than one part of speech. And because of these overlapping, and sometimes meaning is different to explain, especially with abstract nouns, prepositions, exclamations, it's difficult to explain what is the meaning of for, or what is the meaning of above, and so on. So sometimes because of these overlappings and these sometimes difficulties to explain the meaning, some linguists proposed different classification of words. According to the criterion, they use their function, not the form and meaning. Okay, so this is the so-called functional classification of words, not into nouns, verbs, adjectives, but into nominals, adjectivals, adverbials, and verbals. Okay, mi u srpskom mogu samo to da dodam, nominals su imeničke reči, adjectivals su pridevske reči, adverbials su adverbijali, priloške reči, verbals su glagolske reči. Okay, so there is a difference between noun and a nominal. So nominal, which words are classified into nominals? Words which function as the subject or as the object in a sentence, which means nouns, but which other words are also belong to nominals, in addition to nouns? They can function as subject and object.
Maybe pronouns.
Pronouns, exactly. So pronouns also belong to nominals, okay? Adjectivals, adjectives, and determiners, everything which modifies the nouns, everything modifying the nouns. Adverbials are interesting. Adverbials, actually, you have adverbs like quickly, but you can also have prepositional phrases. Znači, u ove adverbialne priloške reči spadaju predloške fraze, prepositional phrases like in the kitchen. This is an adverbial, but it is a prepositional phrase. We can also have a noun phrase as an adverbial. For example, next day. This is a noun phrase, but functions as an adverbial. And so on and so on. So we can have adverbials. And we can even have clauses, which are adverbial clauses. Like when he returned home, he did something. So when he returned home is an adverbial clause. Functions as an adverbial. Okay. And finally, verbals, which are verbs. They have the function of a predicate. Okay, so let me go back to adverbials. They modify the predicate, the noun, they modify the other adverbials. Okay, we already mentioned it when we talked about adverbs. Okay, and verbals. So briefly, this is a functional classification of words based on their function, not on the form and their meaning. Okay, now, and this is the first part of grammar. Okay, and this is the first part of the subject matter which you will have to learn for the test. Okay, so this is grammatical categories, the title from which the second part starts. Okay, so you need there is the borderline here between grammatical categories. Okay, now do you have any questions before we go to grammatical categories? Also, I believe this is also familiar to you. Okay, any questions before grammatical categories?
Može pitanje što se tiče kolokvijuma, pošto nisam tu bila od početka.
Da.
Šta tačno, ako možete nam kažete, sve ide na kolokvijum? Na 30.
30. Da, ja sam rekao, znači to je ugovoreno, još samo čekamo potvrdu učionica, znači mislim da će biti 30. u ovom terminu kojim imate čas, to su one učionice 107, 108, onako kako sedite kad se delite na vežbanjima. Sećate se kad ste se delili i na predavanjima, tako ćete sesti i pisati kolokvijum 30. To je ovaj termin ponedeljak za čas. Da.
A šta sve dolazi u obzir, mislim, kakvi će biti zadaci? Ako možete da nam kažete.
To smo već pominjali negdje na početku, ali evo samo brzo da ne bismo gubili puno vremena. Zadaci, uzorke imate u onoj vežbanki, sećate se ona workbook, imate uzorak starog testa, imat ćete da napišete definicije, imat ćete da date primjer, recimo dobijete navedite dva primjere adverbijala, recimo evo ovo što smo imali malo pre, adverbials. List two examples of adverbials, for example, ili tako dalje. Imaćete, dopunite nešto, rečenicu u kojoj nedostaje neki termin. Znači, ne bih sad više o tome, jer to smo pominjali, a drugo, imate uzorak testa, sećate se, poslije da ste svi fotokopirali onaj workbook, imate uzorak testa, kako test izgleda. Znači, važno je, granica je do grammatical categories. Je li sad malo jasnije?
Razumem, hvala.
Dobro. Tako. Anybody else or anything else, or we can proceed with grammatical categories? I think you're also familiar with these. Okay, so grammar studies parts of speech and grammatical categories. Parts of speech are also related to grammatical categories. You will see how, because some categories are related to nouns, some to verbs, and so on. You'll see. Okay. So a very simple definition of a grammatical category, is that is a system of at least two members, which denotes a grammatical meaning, like case, tense, gender, number. They are grammatical categories. Okay. So system of two members at least. When I say, for example, the category of number, what are the members of this category? Singular and plural. So what are the members of tenses? Present tense, past tense, future tense, and so on. So we have at least two members with a grammatical meaning. Grammatical meaning belonging to grammar, not to physical world, like words like swimming or writing or talking. Okay. Again, members, these two members are mutually exclusive. Okay. You remember this term, we had it when we talked about allophones. Okay. So members are mutually exclusive, meaning very simply, in one sentence, if you have, for example, a noun which is singular, you cannot have it at the same time in the plural. So in the next sentence, you can have it in the plural. So it means they are mutually exclusive in the same context. So again, if you have, for example, in one sentence active, you cannot have it at the same time in the same sentence as passive. Okay, you have to make another sentence. This is what it means, mutually exclusive. Okay, if it's not clear, you can stop me and ask a question. Okay, so we have the following grammatical categories: gender, number, case, person, tense, aspect, mood, voice, comparison, definiteness. Okay, we're going again to discuss very briefly these categories. Okay, but some categories are typically nominal, some categories are typically verbal. Nominal categories like cases. You know, verbs do not have cases. Okay, verbs have tenses. Nouns do not have tenses. Okay, so we're going to discuss the categories, but you have to bear in mind that does not mean that all the languages have all these categories. Some of them, for example, Serbian does not have articles, like articles within definiteness. You'll see when we get to definiteness. Okay, so gender first. Gender related to nouns and pronouns. It is actually a way to classify nouns and pronouns. You already know when you learn words with some language, in some languages like French or German or Spanish, you have to learn the gender. So we have male or masculine, female or feminine, and neuter. 3 genders in English. In some languages, we have only 2 genders, like in French, masculine and feminine. Okay. But generally speaking, we have 3 genders like in English. Okay. Some American, Indian, African languages, they even have a completely different system of gender. Living, non-living. For example, one gender is living beings, the other gender is non-living beings. Or shape. For example, if something is circular, it has one gender. If it is a square, it has a different gender. So, but we are not really interested in these. We're interested in those cases which exist in English. Okay. So we have 2 types of gender. Okay. Natural gender and grammatical gender. Natural gender, when gender of nouns corresponds to biological gender, like in English. So if you have a noun student, you know that it has to be male or female. You know, you have to learn the gender. If you have a noun of a teacher, it has to be male or female. Okay. If you have the noun book, you know that it has to be neuter because it's not a living being. Okay. However, so we have, in addition, we have grammatical gender, where we do not have this correspondence to biological gender, like in Serbian. Knjiga is feminine, Orman is masculine. However, we have to be careful with Serbian, because in Serbian, we actually have a combination of natural and grammatical gender. So if you have student, you know that it is masculine. Studentkinja, it's feminine, and so on. So we have a combination in Serbian of natural and grammatical gender. Grammatical gender with inanimate nouns like these. Okay? So the general rule for English is that persons, professions, family relations They can be masculine or feminine, you know, like doctor or a teacher or uncle, aunt, and so on. Things or ideas are neuter. Animals are usually neuter, but in some cases can be masculine and feminine. This is what it means, okay? This is the general rule. But we can actually do it in greater detail. For example, let's start from persons, okay? So persons, we have three possibilities, three groups. Nouns denoting both genders. One noun denoting both genders, like teacher and friend. You do not know if it is male or female. If you want to specify, you can use modifications in front. Male, female student, man, woman, servant. You can use male, female, man, woman in front. Then the second case is different words for different genders, like brother, sister, king, and queen, male, female. And the third case is the suffix ESS. In some cases, like actor, actress, waiter, waitress, if you want to show feminine gender. Okay, so for persons, we have these three cases. We have an additional thing to explain with some borrowed words. We have some foreign suffixes. Fiancé and fiancé, actually the same pronunciation, but with different spelling. Male, female, borrowed from French. Or Tsar, okay, borrowed from Russian, obviously. Tsarina, or spelled like TS or CZ, okay? So borrowed from other languages. In this case, we distinguish gender in a different way, not just by ESS, okay? Animals are even more interesting. We have the same three cases. One word for which is neuter, frog and snake. You usually do not specify gender, okay? However, if you have a pet, or like a frog, a pet is a pet, you may say male, female frog, if you want to specify gender. If it is a goat, you know the story about the roan, probably. He, she, no, sorry, the wolf with the roan, but he, she, goat is a fairy tale. He, she, goat, okay? You can add pronouns. He, she, wolf, this is the story about roan. He, she, wolf. With birds like pheasant, cock and hen pheasant, if you want to specify gender. With elephants, it's even more interesting. Bull elephant, cow elephant. This is not a new animal from, I don't know, Star Wars or something. This is simply elephant from male and female. Okay. B, we have different words like bull and cow, stallion and mare. Stallion, mare for horses. Okay. And we have the same third case like ESS with lion, lioness. Okay, and this was gender. Okay, do you have any questions about this, or we can go to number? I think you already knew more or less. Okay, so if we have gender, if we have number simply denotes quantity of persons or things. We can have within this category singular and plural. With a very simple definition, singular means one item, one person, one item. Plural means more than one, two or three or more persons or items. In some languages, you even have dual or trial, dvojina, trojina, okay? I cannot really give you examples from English because we do not have these examples, but in some languages they can say we three, we two, and so on, okay? Nouns also divided into countable and uncountable, or sometimes called count, uncount, okay? I think you already know this, but let me just say it briefly. Countable nouns have plural. They get S, like book, books. Uncountable nouns, they are used only in the singular form, like, I don't know, sand, or similar nouns, which do not get S, with some exceptions. You know that we may have some exceptions, but basically they do not get S for plural. This category of number is also related to pronouns and verbs, not only to nouns. Verbs, you know, you have first person singular, for example, third person plural, and so on, okay? Cases, Case indicates the function of nouns or pronouns in a clause, okay? So in some languages, like in Serbian, but not in English, cases denote subject, object, possession, recipient, and so on, okay? So in Serbian, if you see the suffix, you know that it is a subject or an object or a genitive case or a dative case and so on. In English, you have different ways to express cases, okay? So in traditional grammar, we have 7 cases, usually with suffixes. And these cases are divided into independent and oblique. You have the Serbian terms in brackets. So zavisni ili kosi padeži, okay? Independent cases are nominative vocative. They can stand alone. Oblique cases, they cannot stand alone, and they usually have prepositions with them, like o ili sa, and so on, okay? Declension, declinacija, set of case forms in Serbian. In English, there is a very short declension, like books with apostrophe s, and so on. But in Serbian, you have a longer declension. So declension is a set of case forms. And with an example from Serbian, we can show what syncretism is. Syncretism means that 2 or more cases expressed by the same suffix, same form. So perhaps you can tell me which cases do we have in sinovima in Serbian? Which cases? I think I can find 3. Okay, which cases do we have in sinovima? Okay, for example, you can say that kome čemu, which means accusative. Then o sinovima, which is locative, sa sinovima, which is instrumental. Okay, so think about it. You can have 3 different cases for the same form. This is called syncretism. We have an example in English in a minute, a couple of minutes. We'll have an example in English. So, as I already mentioned, in some languages, function and case is indicated by the position in a clause, not by cases. Like subject in English is the first noun if it is not a question, okay? The object is the noun immediately following the verb. We do not have suffixes for cases in English. It is the position in a clause, okay? Person. Person relates to pronouns and nouns. So very simply, we have the first person, the second person, and the third person, singular and plural. The first person singular is the one who speaks. Very simple definition, but you'll have to think about it. The speaker or writer. The second person is to whom somebody is writing or talking. The third person is a participant in a conversation or about whom somebody is talking or writing. Okay? So we have singular and plural. As far as the first person plural is concerned, we can talk about inclusive and exclusive plural. Inclusive means when you, the speaker to whom you are talking, is included. So if you say we, everybody is included, it's inclusive. But exclusive is without you implied. So for example, if you say we can explain this to you, which means several of us, but you is not included, okay? One more thing about pronouns. Informal and formal forms of pronouns, okay, or use of pronouns. Ti, vi u srpskom, ti, znate već kako vi je ljubazno, vi is polite, but we do not have this distinction in English, it is you. However, in some languages, even more than just 2 possibilities like TV exist, like Korean, Japanese, depending on the status. Depends if you're talking to your boss or to your colleague or to somebody else. So we have 2. In English, we do not have distinctions with you, but in some languages like Korean, Japanese, they even have more than 1 option or 2 options. And finally, pronouns actually, this is a deictic category, or let me do it this way. Person is a deictic category. The Greek noun is deixis, adjective is deictic. Noun, the Greek, deixis, adjective deictic. It means that the word gets the meaning in a context, in a concrete situation, which means again this. If you have the pronoun, for example, he, you do not know who this person is without a context, without seeing him or hearing him. You know that this is he. or you do not know who they are without a context. That is what it means determined in a context. You do not know the referent to whom this pronoun refers without a context. This is called the deictic category. You need a context. Okay? Tense, the next category is also deictic. Why? Because it denotes location of a situation in time. So we locate events in relation to the point of speech. Now, so right now, this is the present moment, present time. Okay, everything before is past, everything which follows is the future. That's why it is deictic. Because for us, this is present. For somebody, for example, yesterday would be present, and this yesterday would be tomorrow, and so on. This is relative. You have to determine it in the context. Present, past, and future determined in the context. That's why this is deictic. If it is not clear, you can ask a question, and then we'll perhaps find another example. Okay. So we have present, past, and future. Very simply, present simultaneous with the point of speech, past before the point of speech, future after the point of speech. You also have subdivisions, like in Serbian, aorist imperfekat, plusquamperfekat, futur prvi, futur drugi. Okay. And finally, conjugation is a set of tense forms in English, conjugatia. Okay. You remember declension, declinatia with nouns, conjugation with verbs, tenses of verbs. Okay. Now we have aspects in Serbian glagolski vid or aspect. Very briefly, we distinguish imperfective and perfective verbs in Serbian, pasti, pisati. In English, it's a bit more complex, so we don't really need English examples now. Pisati is imperfective. Mi ih zovemo još nesvršeni glagoli. Napisati, perfective, svršeni glagoli. Okay? Mood in Serbian glagolski način denotes speaker's attitude. Attitude about what you're talking. So you can have three options, basic options. Indicative. If you are simply stating facts, most of the sentences we write or utter are in the indicative. So indicative is neutral. You do not have any specific attitude. This is simply the statement of fact. Subjunctive. Your attitude is your wish, intention, or doubt. This is your speaker's attitude. And imperative is instruction or command or an order. So this example, he wishes he knew the way. Knew. It's subjunctive. So you see that it is in the past tense, knew, but it refers to which period of time? He wishes he knew the way. Knew is formally past, but refers to which period of time? Okay, let me edit it. It refers to present. Voleo bi da zna put. Okay, this is subjunctive, but refers to present. Okay. Think about other subjunctive examples in English, because sometimes when we get to oral exams, students cannot think of any example of subjunctive. This is one. Okay. Think about, you can find many examples in grammar books about subjunctive. You need examples for the oral exam. Okay, voice, just a few more grammatical categories. Voice, this is a relation between the subject, verb, and object. In the active sentence, subject is the agent, which means doing something. In passive, subject is the patient, which means suffering something. I'm absolutely sure you can provide examples. I'm not going to give examples for active and passive in English. Just you should be able to explain subject is the agent, subject is the patient, what it means. Okay. Then comparison. Related to adjectives and adverbs in English, how much a certain feature is present. So we have positive, comparative, and superlative degree. Positive degree is neutral, superlative higher level, comparative, sorry, higher level, superlative the highest level of something. Very simply. Okay. And the last one, here we are going to mention is definiteness. In some languages related to articles. In English, we do have definite, indefinite articles. So definiteness expressed by articles in English, the, and so on. In Serbian, we do not have articles, but the grammarians say that we may have definite, indefinite forms of adjectives. Zelen, recimo, kaput, zeleni kaput. Zelen is, grammarians say indefinite, zeleni is definite. You added e. Okay, zelen, zeleni. This is definite, indefinite form of adjective. We do not have articles, but we do have this category of definiteness. So again, I already mentioned it, not all these categories are found in all the languages. And finally, this is the example of syncretism I mentioned in an English example of syncretism. So one form may indicate several categories, okay, sings. Now, would be the question for you. This sings expresses which categories, this suffix expresses which categories in English, not only one.
Time.
Time, exactly, present time, yes, then
It's one person.
person is the third person, yes. And finally, singular, okay? It is not plural, it is singular. So we have three categories with this as time, person, and number, yes. Okay, all right. Now, this is all about grammar, okay? Okay, let me remind you, the borderline is with the title grammatical category, and now we have morphology, okay? Let me give you a couple of seconds if you want to ask something about grammar. This is the last thing about grammar, which we are going to mention, okay? Do you have any questions about grammar before we go to morphology?
Profesor, ja imam pitanje, ali mi neposredno, to posredno se tiče gramatike. Gde mislite ovo da isteknete? Pošto ja i pored najbolje volje prosto ne mogu da postignem da se ispratim u svemu, jer se preko tematike prosto preleće astronomskom brzinom.
Da, znači ovako, ovaj fajl dobijate preko Google Classroom, je li tako? Znači, i do sada, pretpostavljam, dobili sve fajlove, je li tako?
Pa, kako koje?
Svi su postavljeni, znači ako nešto niste dobili, vi se javite. Znači, preko ovoga jeste, išli smo brzo, ali ja pretpostavljam da ovaj deo bio malo lakši, pa ste malo i znali. Znači, ovo dobijate na Google Classroom, ovo je četvrto, ako se ne varam, predavanje, trebalo da ste dobili 3 fajla. Ako niste, vi to pogledajte pa se javite. Ja pretpostavljam da vi možete to i da preuzmete sa Google Classroom. Znači, ovaj fajl ceo ide na Google Classroom, kao i do sada, da.
Ok, hvala.
A ako ide malo brže, meni se činilo da je ovo bilo relativno lako, tako? Pretpostavljam da ste ovo manje više znali uz možda nekoliko svega stvari koje su bile nove. Tako, još jedna stvar, mi smo na sredini časa, ali ja ne bih sad pravio pauzu jer nekako drugačije okruženje, ali ćemo završiti recimo 5 minuta, pa možda i 10 minuta pre onog vašeg sledećeg časa u 4:30, zato što opet treba da se prijavite, znate kako to već ide za sledeće predavanje. Znači, ne bih pravio sad onu pauzu na sredini časa, ali nećemo ostati baš izvinjam se, do 3:30, do 15:30. Znači, završit ćemo malo. Okay? Now we have morphology. This was grammar. Okay? Morphology, as you already know, I'm sure you already know, studies structure and formation of words. So the term comes from the Greek words like morphe, which is form, and logia, which is science. Okay, science about the form. Okay, so we study the processes which go up to the level of a word. So structure of words, how words are created. However, so obviously, the first term we have to start is word. We have to explain the definition of word. But we all think we know what a word is, but it is sometimes difficult to define. So traditional definition, which you can find in secondary school, primary school grammar books, words indicate specific concept or express different meanings. So if you have a specific meaning, then it is a word, like a book, or I don't know, or a table and so on, or a clock. Okay. However, what would be your comment about this one? Take place. Is it one word or two words in English? You obviously have two units because we have two. We have spacing between, but it has one meaning. Where would you classify this one? Take place into one word or two words? According to our definition, it denotes only one meaning. Okay, we can say that it take place actually is a phrasal lexeme. Frazna leksema ima jedno značenje. So basically it is one word even though you write it as two. This is a problem for our first definition, that it denotes a specific concept. Okay, you have cases where you have two units but they denote one concept. Or how about piglet? It is one unit written as one word, but actually it denotes two concepts: pig, like a kind of animal, plus let, which means young. So we have two concepts, two notions. Okay. So the second possible definition we are going to give is, word is a unit between which you can make a break or speech or space in writing. Okay. So if you have space, then it means it's a word. Okay. However, what about the question? Did you say p or b? P or b written as two words, but they're actually not words. P or b, they're just sounds or phonemes, they're not words. So there is a problem with even this definition, break in speech or space in writing. Okay, so which definition we are going to use is something like this. This is the smallest free unit with one meaning, with its own meaning, which has internal stability and positional mobility. Free unit with its own meaning, smallest. Why is it important to say smallest free unit? Because you'll see that we have morphemes, but some morphemes are not free. We'll explain it later, okay? So this is free meaning can stand alone, okay? Smallest free unit with its own meaning. Internal stability, which means you cannot change the order of syllables in a word. If the word is untouchable, you cannot say, I cannot even pronounce this one. You cannot start with touch and so on. You cannot start with able, okay? This means internal stability. Positional mobility, meaning it can have different positions in a clause. It can change the position in a clause. And will arrive tomorrow. Tomorrow, and will arrive. Tomorrow, change the position. You see that not all words in English can have different positions in a clause, but sometimes you can change the position. So internal stability, positional mobility, you can move it in a sentence. This is going to be our definition of a word. Okay. However, this is not the end of problems with the term word. One word may have different forms, like, cases, persons, tenses, and so on. So book has the form book, books, or book apostrophe s. Okay. So are we going to call all these different words, like book, books, two different words? Or we are going to say that this is one word with two different forms? Okay. To solve this problem, linguists use the term lexeme. So all different grammatical forms of a word with one basic meaning is a lexeme. So book, books, they are one lexeme with different grammatical forms. So we have variations of the same lexeme. So the important thing is that they have the basic meaning, the same basic meaning. Like table, tables, it's one lexeme with two forms, singular and plural. Okay. If you have any questions, do you have any questions about words, definitions of words and lexemes? Okay, the next unit we have to mention is actually the morpheme. Morpheme, okay? Morpheme is actually the basic unit in morphology. It's not a word. The basic unit is morpheme. The definition of a morpheme is it is the smallest unit with an independent meaning or a grammatical function. It is abstract. cannot be divided into smaller units with meaning. And now perhaps we can explain this, okay? This is the smallest unit in independent meaning or a grammatical function. Independent meaning, the word book is a word, but it is at the same time a morpheme. Book, why? Because you cannot divide it into smaller units which would have meaning. You can divide the word book into which units?
Phonemes.
Into phonemes, exactly. You can divide it into phonemes, but they do not have meaning. You remember, phonemes, they do not have meaning, okay? So this is important. Independent meaning, like book, you cannot divide it into smaller units which would have meaning, or a grammatical function. Now, what about, for example, ER in nicer? ER in nicer. ER, does it have an independent meaning, ER in nicer? Well, obviously not, but it has a grammatical function. What is the grammatical function of ER in nicer? Well, nicer is
functions as a comparative.
comparative, exactly. This is what I wanted to hear. Yes, exactly. Functions as a comparative. So just pay attention to the fact that some morphemes have their own meaning, like book. Some have grammatical functions. They cannot stand alone, okay? But they are still morphemes. They have a grammatical function, okay? They're abstract. Let me remind you, you remember phoneme, phone, allophone. Phonemes, we said they're abstract. When we use them in a context, they become phones, and then they have variations as allophones. We have the same things with morpheme, morph and allomorph, okay? So we say that morpheme is an abstract unit. Concrete realization in a word is a morph, and variations are allomorphs. The same like with phone, phoneme, phone, allophone, okay? Morphemes, we use braces, uglaste zagrade, to write morphemes like these. Okay, we'll come to that. Okay, so morph, concrete realization of a morpheme. So you have a book, which is an abstract morpheme. If you use it in a sentence, it becomes a morph. Okay, now allomorphs are more interesting. The same definition as with allophones. Contextually conditioned realization of a morpheme. In this case, not a phoneme, but a morpheme. Okay? So, examples. Plural morpheme for nouns or the third person singular present is s. But it has three allomorphs, s, z, or is, depending on the context. And I'm sure you can provide. For example, do you have an example where with a noun or with a verb, where this is realized as s, z, z, or is? Do you have examples like these? Okay, with book, if you add s, it books. Okay, it's s. With dog, if you add s for plural, it dogs. Okay. If you add, where do you get is? Nouns like which nouns?
Maybe foxes as an example.
Foxes, yes, foxes, churches, and so on. Yes, okay. So what is the rule? You get the suffix s, the morpheme s for plural. But what is the rule? If the nouns ends what? In a what? In like books in a voiceless sound, then it is s. If it ends in a voiced sound like g, dogs, it is z. And if it ends in s or ch, then it is. Because you wouldn't be able to pronounce foxes, okay? It has to be foxes, okay? So again, this is the plural morpheme, s, with three allophones. S with voiceless endings of a verb, of a noun, is with a voiced, and is with nouns ending in s. Okay? We can do the same thing with past tense or past participle, which is ed. The morpheme is ed, but it is realized as the, or it. The, id are allomorphs in English. So again, now, for example, t after which word? If you add ed, pronounce like t in which word? Verb, for example.
Finished.
Finished, yes, because it sh is voiceless. Finished, yes, okay. How about the?
Started.
Started with yes, but it is ed. You see, the example is fine, but it is with ed. Started, yes. The you have to find the voiced sound. How about clean, cleaned, okay? Dream, dreamed, and so on, okay? So the same rule, voiceless, voiced, and the, okay? You cannot say started, you have to say started, okay? So the context depends. Yes, do you have any questions? So the context determines the allomorphs, okay? So this is important. I believe this is clear. If it is not, you can ask, okay? So morphemes have allomorphs, contextually conditioned, okay? So morpheme is a s with 3 allomorphs, morpheme is ed with 3 allomorphs, and so on, okay? We have more examples of morphemes and allomorphs in a minute, okay? Morphemes can be free and bound. I think it's more or less clear. Free if they can stand alone. Bound if they cannot stand alone, okay? So in, work, or house, they are free. They are words, they can stand alone. But er, like in nicer, est, like in nicest, they are bound. You cannot use them alone. They have to be added to an adjective to be able to use them, okay? I think it's quite clear enough, okay? They are bound, okay? Then morphemes can be lexical and grammatical, okay? For example, in a word books, which morpheme is lexical, which is grammatical? I think it's clear, but let's hear it anyway. Which morpheme is a lexical morpheme? Book, yes.
Is grammatical.
Let's say is grammatical, yes. So we have 2 morphemes, book. Why is it lexical? Because it has a lexical meaning. Lexical meaning means meaning from a physical world. It's an object from a physical world. S has a grammatical meaning. It's a grammatical morpheme because it denotes a grammatical notion like plural, okay? So in books, we have 2 morphemes. Book is at the same time what? Free. S is bound, okay? You'll see that it is not difficult, okay? Now, the relation between a morpheme and a phoneme. One morpheme can contain 1 phoneme and usually more phonemes. Could you think of in English, of 1 morpheme which is only 1 phoneme, only 1 sound, only 1 phoneme? Okay, how about the indefinite article like a book? It's only 1 phoneme, but it's also a morpheme, indefinite article like a book, okay? So, but it's usually more than 1 phoneme. It has several sounds or phonemes, okay? Word cannot be smaller than a morpheme because words have to stand alone, have to have their own meaning. You cannot divide the word into units which are morphemes. You can divide the word into phonemes, okay? So, for example, 1 word can have 1 morpheme or even have 2 or more morphemes. How about countable? Okay, how many morphemes in countable? Or uncountable. We can do it together. And uncountable. How many morphemes?
Countable is 2.
2, yes.
And uncountable 3.
3, exactly. So you have count and able. Un for negative, count and able, 3 morphemes. Yes, okay. I think it's more or less clear, okay? So before we go to morphological structure of words, we have to explain how do you know that something is a morpheme in a language? You have to compare words. You remember, how do we know that something is a phoneme in a language? You remember the method of minimal pairs. Probably remember the method of minimal pairs. Okay, we have a similar thing. We have to compare words. Okay, I have examples first from Serbian, then we have English examples. Raz, in, razvezati, razveseliti, razraditi. How do you know that it is a morpheme? Well, you see that it is added to what? Vezati, which has its own meaning. Veseliti has its own meaning. Raditi has its own meaning. So this has to be a separate morpheme with a specific meaning. What would be the meaning of raz in razvezati? Raz.
Ukloniti čvor.
Ukloniti, do the opposite, exactly. Ukloniti čvor. Znači raz, suprotno od ovog što je vezati. Yes, okay. U razveseliti znači nešto drugo, veseliti, znači razveseliti means what? To do more than just denoted by the verb, and so on, okay? So by comparing these words, we come to the conclusion that raz is a morpheme in Serbian, okay? But what happens with raznolik, okay? We still do not divide it into raz and nolik. Why not? Why we do not divide it into raz and nolik? Well,
maybe because nolik doesn't have any meaning in on its own.
Yes.
Lik, on the other hand, has.
Yes, exactly. So nolik is not a morpheme in Serbian, does not mean anything. This is what you said. Yes, you wanted to add something.
Well, I just wanted to define lik as maybe appearance or a picture or something close to it.
Yes. So in this case, our division is razno and lik. Okay, razno and lik are morphemes, two morphemes in English. But in razvezati, raz is a morpheme, because you do not have the meaning of nolik. Okay, you do not use it. You do not divide it like this one. Okay, razuman, again, you do not divide it in razuman. Why not? You divide it into razum. Uman does exist, but why do we not divide it into raz and uman? What about the meaning of razuman and uman and razuman?
Well, maybe the root is the word or mind,
yes.
And it has a meaning. But combined with raz creates another word, or maybe how do you say misaonu celinu, ja bih rekao na srpskom.
Yes, abstract noun, yes.
Razum.
Yes.
And an is just what's called.
Yes. Yes, okay. Anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. Yes, exactly as you said. Raz uman. Na što bi vas to asociralo? Ako je neko uman, pa dodajete raz, šta biste očekivali kao značenje? Da je to suprotno od uman, je li tako? Nešto što ne postoji, što nije razuman, znači jednu stvar, a onaj ko nema razuman bi bilo nešto drugo. So, the rule is morphemes, the meaning of morphemes should be related to the meaning of the entire word, okay? That's why we do not divide it into razuman, okay? Does not make sense. Or an English example with this: disability, disadvantage, disagreement, disarmament. In all these, we have this plus something: ability, advantage, agreement, in this case, armament. So we come to the conclusion that we have two morphemes, ability, and advantage, and so on. And this is a morpheme. This is a bound morpheme, cannot stand alone. But what is the meaning of this in these English words? This, disability, disadvantage. Well, I'm sure. Yes, tell us.
The opposite of that.
The opposite, exactly, the opposite.
This, can I say something?
Yes, okay.
This je predmetak starogrčkog porekla u brojnim složenicama sa značenjem negacije, tako da se njim u principu potire sve ispred čega stoji.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the same case. Probably some of these are even borrowed, perhaps. So this is the opposite. Yes, exactly what you said. Yes, exactly. Okay. All right. So we have morphemes, grammatical, lexical, bound and free, and the number of morphemes. Think about the meaning and the function, okay? Any questions about it, or we can go to the morphological structure of words? We're going to stay for about, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll stop because you need a break before the next literature class, okay? So morphological structure of words. If you want to divide words into morphemes, you have to think about the root, base, and affixes. I'm sure you already know, but let me explain it anyway. Root is a morpheme carrying the meaning, cannot be further subdivided into morphemes. This is the root of core. You cannot subdivide it into morphemes. You can divide it into phonemes. Okay? Affixes, bound morphemes, divided into prefixes, infixes, and suffixes. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but so briefly. Prefixes, okay, bound affixes or affixes added where? Before the root or base. Infixes added inside the root or base. Suffixes added at the end of the root or a base, okay? So in the example, very simple one, reorganize. Organ is the root. It carries the meaning. You cannot divide it further into morphemes. Re is a prefix. IZE is a suffix added to the after the base or root, okay? So this is the root and affixes. Affixes are bound. Now we have to explain the term base. So we have a root, and the base is a form consisting of a root to which another affix is added. So untouchable, what would be the root here? Obviously touch, okay? Touch, okay? What do you think, what we added next? Prefix un or suffix able? What did we add next? Able. Yes, because there isn't such a word in English which is untouched, does not exist. So it has to be touch plus able, and this is a base. This is what I mean. Root and an affix added, to which we add a prefix un. Okay, so touchable is a base. Touch is the root. Touchable is a base, to which we add un. Yes, and you have to think about the meaning. So order of analysis, meaning of words. There isn't such a word as untouched. The base has to be touchable, okay, before you add un, okay? So roots are usually free. This is to be expected because they carry the meaning, they are morphemes, okay? But usually there are also bound roots, desaneos, okay? Usually words from Greek or Latin origin borrow into English, okay? I have one example, but I'm sure you can find many more, okay? Audi, related to hearing, in, audible, audience, auditory, okay? So it is repeated at the beginning, borrowed from, this is a Latin root or base, actually root, to denoting hearing, and to which you add English suffixes, able, uns, ori, auditory. You add English suffixes, okay? So this is a bound base or a root which you cannot use alone. They are borrowed from other languages, okay? And finally, before maybe we can just finish this, and then we'll see, maybe we can stop, okay? Affixes can be divided into class changing and class maintaining, okay? So for example, no, let me explain it. What do you expect if you have class changing affixes? It means class here means parts of speech. If you do change the part of speech, then it is class changing. If it does not change the part of speech, then it is class maintaining. So for example, rewrite. What would you say about re? We have the verb write. Rewrite is also a verb. So this is class maintaining. We do not change the part of speech in rewrite. How about friendship, organized, weekend, sorry, widen. What about friendship? Ship is a suffix. It's not a ship in the meaning of vehicle, okay? Ship, šta biste rekli za friendship? Ship as a suffix, class changing or class maintaining and organize?
Class maintaining.
Class maintaining, because yes, friend is a noun, friendship is also a noun. Organ is a noun, organize is a verb, so we changed the class, okay? Wide is an adjective, widen becomes a verb, so it's class changing, okay? Wide, adjective becomes a verb, okay? It's not too difficult, so think about it. Class meaning part of speech, okay? And morphology finally, divided into two large segments. Inflectional morphology and word formation. This is a very important difference, so you should be able to explain this when you come to the oral exam, okay? So inflectional morphology, different grammatical forms of one word, word formation, in Serbian forma reči, formation of new words, okay? So to illustrate this, inflectional morphology is, for example, what? Books. This belongs to inflectional morphology. You have singular and plural of one word. You do not create new words. Whereas word formation means formation of new words, like what? Like, let me go back to this. For example, friendship. It's a new word, friendship. Rewrite, it's a new word, okay? So this is not just a grammatical form of one word, but completely new word. And this is not too difficult, so we have inflectional morphology and word formation, okay? And now we have inflectional morphology. Perhaps this would be a good way, a good place or point to stop, because we have this topic. You'll have, I think, about 10 minutes before the next lecture. Now, how about possible questions about today's lecture or other, for example, questions like test or actually midterm test and so on? Okay, I can give you a minute or two to think about the possible questions.
Could you please explain the I mutation?
Sorry, did not he explain what? Explain?
I mutation.
I mutation, E mutation, which means in Old English, yes, okay? Influence of the sound E. That's why it is better to pronounce it E mutation. It is a letter I, but it is E mutation, okay? Influence of letter E to the, you remember to other vowels like O or U. You remember the examples like foot and feet, okay? Let me explain it briefly, okay? So you remember fate in Old English with A. If you add is, this was our example, if you add is for plural, this E from is changes A from fate into feet, okay? So this is now irregular form. So E mutation is the influence of the letter E, or sorry, of the sound E to other vowels like O or U in English words, okay? Is it clearer now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think somebody else wanted to ask something as well.
Professor, just wanted to ask you about the midterm test, duration of it. How long will it last?
So you have an hour and a half, like today, okay? So it's going to, you'll need an hour and a half. You get, you get questions from history of English, phonetics, phonology, and first part of grammar. I actually gave you till the grammatical category, yes.
And the book or the exercise book is, I mean, is it enough for preparing for the exam?
Yeah, actually,
I have a problem with the email, certain materials which you've mentioned I still haven't received, I'm afraid.
Znači, sve materijale, ja mislim da su, pretpostavljam, ostali dobili preko Google Classroom, preko kojih ste dobili obaveštenja, tako pretpostavljam svi o današnjem času. Znači, tamo su postavljene, ako želite, ja vam te iste fajlove mogu poslati i na mail, taj pojedinačni, znači ukoliko ne dobijate. Znači možda je bolje da se fokusirate na te fajlove, znači ne toliko na workbook, tamo je skraćeno, tamo je sve to, ali vidjeli ste da je skraćeno, možda po jedan duži pasus, vidjeli ste verovatno. Znači ako želite, ja vam mogu poslati ova 3 ili 4 fajla koliko ih ima, znači na taj pojedinačni e-mail, jednostavno ako niste dobili, onda možda provider iz nekog razloga nije poslao, vas je 70, znači možda jednostavno neku adresu preskoči Google Classroom. Nemam drugo objašnjenje. Znači, najbolje sa fajlova da se pripremate i ove koje smo danas imali. Da, eto, da.
Hvala vam, profesor.
Da.
Profesore, da li ćemo sledeće nedelje imati u ovo vreme vežbe isto na ovaj način ili kako će to funkcionisati?
Ja sam govorio sam sa koleginicama sa književnosti, sa Arijanom i Bojanom, da one prihvataju da se ovako organizuje čas. Vidjet ćemo sa Natašom. U svakom slučaju ćete imati vežbe. Mislim da vam je Nataša do sad slala materijale. Tako. Znači, dobit ćete informacije. Ja ću Nataši predložiti da ona i dalje održi ovako zajedno čas sa sat i po, s tim što su vežbe nekako malo drugačije, znači treba više vi da učestvujete. Znači, evo najbolje da kažem tako, ja ću još danas poslati Nataši mail da vam blagovremeno vas obavesti, ali ćete svakako imati čas u ovom terminu. Moram da priznam, neka ona o tome odluči pa ćemo videti. Znači, ukoliko rešimo da, znate da smo jednom imali 2 predavanja uzastopce, pa 2 vežbe uzastopce, to ćemo se ona i ja dogovoriti, a dobit ćete sigurno informacije za dan, 2 već kako će biti organizovan čas. Da, eto.
Hvala vam.
Dobro, ja ću ovaj ceo fajl, možda i samo to da vam kažem, pa ćemo onda stati. Ovaj ceo fajl, vidite da ovde ima još dosta, imate inflectional morphology, pa word formation i tako dalje. Ja ću vam ovaj ceo fajl poslati, da ga sada ne sečem. Poslaću vam ceo, ali ćemo nastaviti tamo gde smo stali. Znači, mi ćemo nastaviti sa inflectional morphology, dobit ćete ceo materijal, možete da pogledate ako želite unapred. Eto, to je ono što sam ja još imao da kažem. Ja sada skidam ovaj fajl, mi se sad možemo evo da se pozdravimo, ako nema više drugih pitanja, ako ima možete pisati na mail i znači imate 30. test, ali ćemo vam to još potvrditi i učionice su rezervisane samo da još to sve potvrdimo. Ako nema nikakvih drugih pitanja, evo ja vas onda pozdravljam, doviđenja, pa se vidimo u sledećem terminu kad budu predavanja.
Doviđenja.
Doviđenja.